Got ahead of you. Thank you so much, Chairwoman Lee, and thank you so much, Ranking Member Sewell, as well as all the members of the subcommittee. I want to thank Representative Carey for that generous introduction. My name is Frank LaRose. I'm proud to serve the people of Ohio as their 51st Ohio Secretary of State, and I'm happy to talk with you all today about the things that we're doing in the Buckeye State to keep the ball moving forward. Fair elections, of course, are the foundation of our democratic republic. They serve to document and to certify what Thomas Jefferson called the consent of the governed, that precious permission that the citizens give each and every one of us to serve them as public office holders. Of course, access to and the integrity of our elections is vital to that representative government on which our states and nation have thrived. With integrity comes confidence in the system and a belief by the electorate that each election had a sure winner and a sure loser. Integrity and confidence, they go hand in hand. And yet, our nation faces a crisis of confidence in our elections. Republicans and Democrats alike are losing faith in the electoral system. That hasn't always been the case, and it must end. You've all likely heard the phrase, as goes Ohio, so goes the nation. For decades, the Buckeye State has served as one of the nation's bellwethers when it comes to elections. With that moniker comes intensive scrutiny and attention. That spotlight that we've been under, the kind of scrutiny and attention that empowered Ohio to implement election protocols that have made our state a gold standard for conducting elections. Over the past 2 decades, Ohio has never rested on our laurels. The only way to stay ahead of the curve is with innovation, continuous improvement. With the crisis of confidence our nation now faces, immediate action is now required. So Ohio is stepping up to the bat once again with 2 significant advancements designed to strengthen that public trust. I look forward to sharing those advancements with you today. First, a focus on strengthening election transparency through technology. More than 60 years ago, Congress enacted the Civil Rights Act of 1960, seeking in part to prevent acts of voter suppression and discrimination through the retention of paper election records. The idea was simple: to allow for the scrutiny of election-related records so that the public could ensure that lawful votes weren't being altered or stolen. This requirement established a tradition of transparency that has served to protect the voting rights of all Americans for decades. The problem, however, lies in the fact that this legislation was written, of course, in an analog era. It resulted in a patchwork of state and local practices that have not kept pace with modern technology or the expectations of the public. States have done little, if anything, to codify the retention of electronic election records. They lack consistent standards for defining important election data, and they've never set clear guidelines on how and for how long that electronic voter data should be stored, or even whether or how it should be disclosed for analysis. A comparative analysis with colleagues in other states finds antiquated, inconsistent data retention practices that fall considerably short of the transparency we all expect, and in many cases, election officials update their records by simply saving over old data. What this does is it oftentimes cause confusion and lack of transparency. In other cases, efforts to clean the rolls may even result in making things more confusing. As the Secretary of State in one of the nation's biggest political battlegrounds, I'm leading an effort to change this. Working with our state legislature, we've introduced legislation that we call the Data Act. It codifies key election definitions and retention requirements for voter registration and for the records of ballots cast. I'm asking my colleagues in other states to consider using this legislation as a framework for their own reforms, and together we can adopt uniform standards that will increase the trust that people have because of the transparency that we have in our elections. Second, an innovation that we've brought to Ohio recently is called the Public Integrity Division. A review of our office's capabilities demonstrated that there was room to strengthen the investigative function far beyond what they were. For too long, questions of election law violations or campaign finance violations were left up to election clerks, dedicated and purposeful individuals, but people that were not trained as law enforcement professionals and didn't know how to conduct a professional investigation. Demonstrating integrity comes with the very direct and positive impact of increasing participation in our elections. And that's what our Public Integrity Division is all about, investigating those rare instances of voter fraud so that we can keep them rare and increase the trust that people have in our elections. In Ohio, where our efforts have maintained the confidence of voters, we're seeing great success both in turnout and in participation. And that's something that we're proud of in the Buckeye State. And I look forward to your questions.